If there was maybe one theme I could boil the story down to, it would be destiny. It's what lies at the heart of almost every character's arc. It's the perennial battle between good and evil, passion and morality, responsibility and freedom. Many characters in the series struggle with this duality. They have trouble understanding what's right. The heart of the story is paving your own destiny and understanding what is right and where you're needed. From Zuko choosing good or evil, Aang balancing freedom and responsibility, to Sokka understanding where he's needed. When I first started making the video, I believed Avatar was about choosing your destiny, but that perspective has been somewhat changed upon further reflection. It is about destiny, yes, but that's being a bit reductive. You need to also understand where you're needed and how you fit in the greater universe. I don't think it's quite as simple as just follow your destiny. I think in Avatar, there are 3 stages of destiny. The first is knowing who you are, the second is understanding where you're needed, and the last is to stay true and not lose yourself on the way. Zuko's arc shows us you need to know who you are and understand your calling. Sokka tells when and how we need to manifest that which you are, and Aang gives us the freedom to act within the framework of your calling. Zuko was raised to be his father's child through and through, but from birth, it's clear that that wasn't who he was. He naturally had a kind heart taking after his mother. Upon being labeled disrespectful for exhibiting passionate humanitarian concern during the Fire Nation's meeting, he's banished from the Fire Nation and given the impossible task of capturing the Avatar with his uncle. Even after finding him, he has many unsuccessful encounters with the Avatar. After Iroh and Zuko escape Azula's trap at the beginning of Book 2, they are then forced to live from town to town and hide their Fire Nation roots. This is symbolically important, as it's during this time where Zuko is forced to wrestle with said Fire Nation roots. A few episodes later, and he's tangentially wrapped in another conflict with Team Avatar. This time, he has to choose between saving the Bison or capturing him. With the guidance of Iroh, he makes the right decision. Minutes later, going back to the tea shop, he falls sick while coping with his decision. Being primarily with his uncle for the time being, he wakes up and has the chance to live out a normal life and finally be himself for the first time in 3 years since being banished. He no longer had to be a slave to his old life. You can immediately tell this level of joy and authenticity to his demeanor. This is who Zuko should be. Given different situations, he could be content simply running a small business with his uncle. Given time, he would get a girlfriend and maybe a wife and start a humble family. But we can't dwell on this moment for too long. A few episodes later, he is once again thrusted into conflict with the Avatar. He still has a kernel of his old life in him, and without his uncle being there to help contain it, it may consume him. He'll have to wrestle by himself next time. Next time, he'll have to choose whether he wants to be good or evil. This oscillation reaches a breaking point at the crossroads of destiny. In a climactic finale, Zuko must choose between one of his 2 personas. Will he make the right decision, or will he make the wrong choice? He chooses wrongly. This shows us that Zuko still needs his uncle to change himself into who he ought to be. He hasn't cultivated the agency to do so on his own in the face of overwhelming temptation. When he returns to the Fire Nation, there was temporary satisfaction, but no everlasting joy. He doesn't feel right. This is because, in this moment, he is not who he should be. He is his father's idea of who he should be, not who he ought to be. No matter how hard he pretends to be someone else, his true self will still keep pulling him in the other direction. This hits another breaking point at the beach. He sees a picture of himself and is reminded of how things used to be. He remembers the time he spent with his mother and his cousin and his uncle. He knows who he ought to be and knows it cannot work in unison with who he thinks he wants to be. All of this builds overwhelming confusion and angst as he wrestles with the cognitive dissonance. Ozai never took away his honor. His honor was always there. The one time he actually did lose his honor was when he betrayed his uncle. His arc finally wraps around itself as he directly confronts his father and tells him he will follow his true destiny and join the Avatar. In a cathartic moment of self-discovery, he reflects the lightning his father throws at him and leaves. Similar to where he was back at the tea shop with Iroh, Zuko was living out the kind of passionate soul he always was, this time in the place he was most needed. Zuko's story is a lesson for all of us. Does Zuko want to be a proper, moral person, or the person his father wants him to be? In the crossroads, he couldn't choose both. One has to win. The inability to decide between two contradictory things is equivalent to being tormented by both of them. It turns you into someone who can't walk straight, metaphorically speaking. One foot is pushing him in one direction, and the other foot pulls him in another. Choosing one path necessitates the foregoing of the other. A lack of internal union does nothing but magnify suffering and anxiety. Indecision breeds doubt. Doubt breeds cynicism. Cynicism breeds nihilism. You have to make a choice. You may not know if it is optimal at the moment, but it has to be decisive. You cannot be well adjusted or properly put together otherwise. But don't just make any choice. Make an educated choice. Find out who you are and choose to be that. There might not be a clear right or wrong, but that's partly for you to discover. Thankfully, most of our life decisions nowadays aren't moral decisions unlike our characters in Avatar, but the message still stands. There is wisdom in choosing one thing over the other, one which preferably aligns with your aptitudes. For much of the story, Zuko wasn't pleased because he couldn't get what he wanted, and he couldn't get what he wanted because he couldn't choose one thing or the other. Eventually, he found out who he was and chose that. Never forget who you are, and always be that. There's no one else you can be. What I've said is all motivational and nice, but what about those people who still feel displaced even once they believe they are being themselves? I think there's still unexplored nuance that needs to be acknowledged in order for there to be a full and proper discussion on the issue, and I'll be exploring that a bit using the Azula redemption idea. To be direct, Azula needs to change some of that toxicity and evil, even if that is a part of who she is. Of course, she will never completely change, but she must change some of it, or rather repress her bad parts. Some of her personality traits and aptitudes may not be bad if funneled through the right moral code. Azula's strength and tactfulness are not bad in and of themselves and can be channeled towards something good. Strength isn't bad, oppression is. Tactfulness and charisma aren't bad, but using them to insidious ends is. Some behaviors really shouldn't be promoted in a healthy, mature, and civilized society. For Azula, her sadistic demeanor would not be fit. I kept saying that you should unabashedly be who you are. But what if who you are causes too much trouble? In some cases, it's worth considering not expressing that part of who you are. In the real world, for example, there are certainly people with an especially bad temper who must rein that in. Identity is partly who you think you are, but also partly the manner in which you identify with other people. If that identity is going to be logical, it has to provide you with a mode of properly functioning in the world. Part of the problem with these negative traits that people are born with is that they cannot function in a civilized society, or in some case they may be too othered. You have to conform to some degree in order to get by in the world, or else you'll be completely displaced. Of course then, you have to give up a part of your identity as you conform. If Azula holds some of her negative traits as intrinsic to her being, she would have to change that. If she doesn't, there will be no place for her in a civilized society. I can't really give a concrete answer as to when you have to conform and when you should express your individuality because it's really on a case-by-case basis, but it is something worth highlighting. I think it's appropriate to plant this idea to give a holistic perspective on the discussion. Sokka is the masculine cornerstone of Team Avatar. He has wit, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. He grew up mentoring younger members of his tribe, cultivating leadership qualities there. And on Team Avatar, he's the rational bedrock. Beyond all of this, however, lies an acknowledgement of his own weaknesses, and that makes him insecure. Throughout the show, he wrestles with this underlying issue. All throughout his life, he's wrestled with his self-image of leadership and masculinity. Sokka wasn't allowed to go to war because he had to learn to man up, and he needed to understand where he was needed, not just what he was needed for. Those wiser than him knew that. In this case, it wasn't that his aspirations were wrong, it's that his timing and location was wrong. From a young age, the chiefs probably knew Sokka had characteristics that would make him a good leader. They knew that him being the eldest among the Water Tribe boys would help him fully realize those qualities. But it wasn't his time to go to battle. Not yet. I wouldn't say these ideals were completely thrusted onto him, but there was likely a mix of natural and nurtured forces at play. These qualities, however, were challenged once it's made apparent how powerful and imposing Aang, Katara, and Toph were compared to him. He felt as though he had no place. He felt useless, not contributing anything. In Sokka's master, he fully acknowledges this and is completely humbled. After the tasks he completed with Master Piandao, Sokka acknowledged that while he may not be a bender like his sister, he excels in matters of intelligence and ingenuity. Hakoda said being a man is knowing where you are needed. I would extend that to saying that being a man means to know what you are needed for. Team Avatar doesn't need another protector, they need someone who is versatile, creative, and inventive. Team Avatar isn't a group of individuals, but one unit, one body. Just as a body is one unit with many parts, so too is Team Avatar one unit with many parts. The leg shouldn't say to the arm that it's useless because it doesn't appear to be doing much, because it's actually the leg that keeps everything moving. The eye shouldn't say to the ear that it's useless because they have different functions, because both are important. If I were to try and apply this metaphor, Team Avatar has the limbs, which are Katara and Toph. It has the heart, which is Aang. It has the eyes, which is Zuko. But it doesn't have the brains to lead them and think rationally. That's the role Sokka takes up. It may not be glamorous, but it is necessary. Even among the Water Tribe men, Sokka was different once he grew up more. Sokka thought that because his father and a lot of the other men in the tribe were warriors, he was destined to be a warrior too. He still is, but he is much more than that. If that was his only role, he wouldn't be a fit for Team Avatar. They have many powerful warriors. Instead, he had to maximize the traits that made him special. That happened to be that he was extremely smart and a good strategist. So that was the primary seat he filled. He assumed the position of leader, but led in his own way and understood where he was needed. It's not only knowing who you are, but knowing where you're needed. Similar to Zuko in the tea shop, Sokka is needed somewhere. Zuko could not stay in the tea shop, just as Sokka could not go to war. One is acting in the wrong place, and one is acting too soon. Both need to work where and when they are needed. It's important to will yourself in some direction, but it can't be aimless. Finally, I think Aang's character arc rounds out the philosophy. Aang was a fun-loving air nomad who wanted nothing more than to just be that. He ran away from his responsibilities because of it. He didn't want to be the Avatar. Being the Avatar meant he couldn't be a kid anymore. Aang's arc in Book 1 was him coming to terms with his destiny and accepting the responsibility of being the Avatar. The air nomads were completely wiped out, and he feels like it was because he wasn't there. He understands that his destiny is to save the world and become the next Avatar. But just because that's who he is, it didn't mean that he had to be the same Avatar as the previous ones. Aang does learn from those before him, but actively makes different decisions than the other Avatars, often to his benefit. He had to understand his place in the universe, and once he did, he controlled how he functioned within that framework. When fighting Ozai, Aang had to choose to either kill him or find another way. All the Avatars told him he needed to kill him, even Avatar Yang Chen, who understood his convictions and traditions better than anyone else. She even directly said he had to give up his spiritual convictions and lose himself in order to save the world. Guru Patik tells Aang to give up all of his worldly desires, but Aang doesn't do that. He finds another way to solve the problem without losing himself. Aang is still the Avatar, but does it in his own way. Every Avatar in some sense has their own unique way of handling situations. Roku didn't kill Sozin, for example. They all have the same duty but go about it in unique and personal ways. Understanding who you are and settling down on something doesn't mean you forego everything unique about yourself. You may in fact be able to incorporate that into what you settle down on. To bring this all full circle, it's important to actually settle down on something. If you don't, you will never be anything. When discussing that which you can be, I think it's appropriate to think about it in the framework of children. The best thing about children is that they can be anything, and the worst thing about children is that they can be anything. Because they can be everything, they haven't decided to be anything. Taking Zuko, Sokka, and Aang's character arcs in their totality, my advice will be to find who you are, understand when and where you're needed, and work within that framework to become the ultimate version of yourself. What are your aptitudes? What are you interested in? Find that out, work within that, passionately, and see what happens. Even if you miss, the skills and friends you've gained along the way will not be lost. The lessons you've learned and the skills you've acquired can still be utilized. Something earned is something gained, to remix a phrase from my Mob Psycho 100 video. You can still look back at what you have done and admire it, even if only for the simple fact that it was something meaningful that you had done. You understand the importance and sacrifice of something once you have done something to actually acquire those skills for yourself. A carpenter has more reverence for a door than the average person. A photographer has more respect for a well-composed shot than a casual onlooker. I'm not saying that just gaining these skills should be your primary objective, but all I'm saying is that even if you don't quite hit the mark, you're still in a good position. A much better position than you would be in otherwise. It's far better to become something than remain anything and become nothing. You are not only something that is, you are something that is becoming. The extent to which that you can become far transcends your understanding. Is an acorn separate from an oak tree, or was it always an oak tree? The seed always had that latent potential in it. What it grows into given the proper nutrients far transcends its comprehension. We may not be part of the royal family or prophesied to save the world, but those around you need you to be the best you that you can be. It will be difficult, but you owe it to them to do that. Friedrich Nietzsche said, "The meaninglessness of suffering, not suffering itself, was the curse that lay mankind so far." I think he was wrong about a lot of things, but I don't think he was wrong about that. Find meaning in the mundane. Always remember what you're working for, whether that be God, your family, or anything else you feel passionate about. Commit yourself to being your best. Commitments have enduring value. Try your best at your job. Be the best brother you can be. Be the best friend you can be. Like a romantic partner, you have to eventually settle down on one person and focus your efforts there. Likewise, you have to be loyal to your friends and very intently focus on your job or project, which hopefully fits into your aptitudes. Just make sure you don't lose yourself on the way. Work passionately on something worthwhile, but remember to keep your sanity.